thanks for coming tonight. I hope the humidity isn't going to be too hard. I apologise, we ended up having a few late bookings, which is fine, but it will be tight. So we'll keep this moving tonight and try and finish by about 8:30. So what we'll do is I'll love to introduce our candidate, for Herbert, Felicity Cole, and she will speak a little bit about herself and why she's running. I'll talk about a little bit about myself and why I ran for politics. We'll talk about our solutions. We'll have a 10-15 minute break, I think, just to let you guys get out of here because it's going to be pretty warm. And then when we come back, we will take some questions for about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how many questions are from the floor. And hopefully we'll finish by about 8:30 to 9 o'clock, depending on how the evening rolls out. Okay then, well look, first of all, can I thank you coming tonight? Thank you very much for coming tonight. As you know, we do have a federal election in just over 4 weeks' time. I think it's fair to say that many Australians are looking for a change. Many Australians are looking for political parties that are going to, surprisingly enough, put Australia first. And they want political parties who are going to actually have a hope, have a vision, and provide a sense of hope to people. Because the problem with the two major parties is that they have been so engrossed in politics for so long, they have actually lost sight of what their roles and responsibility are, which is to provide a better standard of living, or a high standard of living for both yourselves and of course most importantly for our children. So with that, I'll pass over to Felicity Cole, who's been a big supporter of mine on a number of occasions. This is the fourth time I've actually spoken at Townsville, and I'm flattered to see so many people here, because I would have thought after about the fourth time the same sort of, you tend to think it's the same people that follow you, but the fact that there's, how many people have been to one of my stump speeches before in Townsville? Oh, okay, about half. Okay, so we've got some newbies as well, that's great. So thanks for coming out again, I really appreciate it. So I'd like to just introduce Felicity Cole, our candidate for People First candidate for Herbert.
So a bit of info about me, because I'd say that a large percentage of you have no idea who I am. There's a couple of people in the room that know me. I've actually been in Townsville for 30 plus years. I first came up here in the mid-90s, started work with the that media print newspaper, the Townsville Bulletin, and did my cadetship there as a photographer. So I saw a lot of things in Townsville over the years. I was here when we had the Black Hawk tragedy. Does anyone remember that? A lot of events that went on. I actually photographed the Eddie Mabo burial at the West End Cemetery. Does anyone remember that one? Yep. And yeah, I've been around a lot of politicians and just basically media personalities over the years, seen a lot in this town. I then went on to have 3 children who are all teenagers now, and basically because I wanted to be a stay-at-home mother and earn an income so I could be the main carer of my children. And in their formative years, which as you know is pretty important, 0 to 7, we want to be involved in our children's life and have an influence over them. So I did that and ran a photography business, photography/social media content creation. So I created that business and I did a lot of jobs around Townsville for certain people. I haven't done a university degree, but I've been to I did a TAFE course quite a few years ago, but I've had a lot of life experience, and why I'm standing here is because I cannot believe what has happened to our country, particularly going back, during that time, that very challenging time. When I saw footage of our police shooting rubber bullets into our people, Australians, I just thought, what is going on? This is really unhinged. The control was out of control. And basically, as like Jared says, I don't need the government to co-parent my children, and also I'll take my health into my own hands. I don't need anybody else telling me how to look after my health. So then, of course, Jared was up here in 2021, or was it 2022? It was such a blur that couple of years, wasn't it? And I organised an event for him. I said, yep, coming up, I'll organise it. And we had 200 people. We had 200 people here at the Bellevue. So that, I guess, was a reflection of how popular this guy was and still is, and has got a huge following now. So I'm very aligned with his policies, particularly about the net zero. I come from the Latrobe Valley originally, that's where I was born, and it was a coal country. I grew up in Morwell. Does anybody know it, Latrobe Valley? Yeah. So my was pretty much my primary school was next door to an open cut coal mine. But we had a lot of Italians, Greeks, a lot of immigrants coming in back then, and basically they started off and built their wealth from scratch. They did all the hard work. I was friends with all sorts of people from all sorts of different cultures. But how that has all changed now, it's very different. We're having problems with, there are some groups that they're not intending on integrating with Australians, I find, in bigger cities, everywhere really. So we're looking closely at that, and also I've been talking to people locally about issues around Townsville on Magnetic Island. We've got in the Herbert electorate, so who's in the Herbert division? Who votes in Herbert, which is what we're going for? That's great. So we're going to get out there and talk to more people, and basically we need people to man the polling booths. That would be a huge help if people can help with that, because like you said, we've got 4 weeks. 4 weeks to get the word out and get Jared and Owen to people that haven't been converted yet. So anyway, I'll hand it over to Jared. Thank you.
Thanks, Felicity. That was a very good effort. That was her first political speech. She said she didn't know what she was going to say, but she actually turned out to be a natural. So very good. And I should also acknowledge Felicity's sister, Stephanie Eaton, who's a very good friend of mine and has helped a lot of people with vaccine injuries. And the two sisters, they're superstars, and it's a great honour to know that they're both supporting me and people first in this upcoming election. But look, let's get down to business. Why did I run for politics? I wanted to make sure our children get the same opportunities as our forefathers gave to us. I think the story of Australia is a fantastic one. I think our heritage, the sacrifices, everything that our forefathers have done to make this country such a great country, we need to uphold and preserve, and we need to make sure we imbue in our children a sense of gratitude, a sense of perseverance, a sense of, develop the skills in them that they can build infrastructure and stand on their own 2 feet and basically be very resilient, rather than allow what's happening whereby the government is effectively assuming control of our children. It's all very well. We believe that the government should give people a hand up, not a handout. We don't want the government to basically turn our children into human beings that are incapable of thinking for themselves or unable to think for themselves, who are going to be afraid to say what they really think, because this is the world we seem to be moving towards, and that's not a world I think that I want to see, and I'm sure many of you don't want to see. The second reason why I ran for politics is that I want to stand up for Australians who try to stand up for themselves. Effectively, I don't care which side of politics you're on. I've never been driven by the partisan political, left versus right stuff. I'd have to describe myself as 33% small business liberal, 33% farmer, 33% blue collar labour, and 1% hippie. Maybe sometimes on weekends a little bit more than 1% hippie, but when I was a bit younger and had the odd wild weekend. But long story short, it's all about protecting the individual and their families. Can you hear me up the back there, guys? Yeah. It's all about protecting the individual and their families from the unrestrained authority of the institutions. And those institutions are big government, the big bureaucracy who spends your taxpayers' dollars, big corporations who, you'll often see CEOs pay themselves huge salaries despite the company's performance might be lacklustre, if not going backwards. big super funds who are now managing $3 trillion of your money, despite the fact you don't even get to elect who manages those. If you're outside of self-managed super fund in an industry fund, retail fund, you don't even get a say in who manages your money. And then, of course, there's also big unions. Many of these union leaders today don't really fight for their members. They're too busy driving ideological agendas instead of actually standing up for workers' rights. So we've got to make sure that all these big institutions, whatever their roles and responsibilities are, uphold their fiduciary duty. Because there is a theme across all walks of life, regardless of their political background, that people no longer trust the establishment. Now, while we once upon a time always had a healthy distrust of the establishment, that's the Australian way, we know that it's actually, we've all been around long enough to see that there's been a rapid decline in any form of accountability and transparency. And that really has to change. So that's the second reason why I ran for politics. The third reason why I ran for politics is I believe the role of government is to serve the people and not control the people. And what we've seen, I know that's a big highfalutin saying, you can easily, say that's always the case, but it is the case because in the last 40 to 50 years, we have seen governments sell all the infrastructure that provides essential services. We've seen it right here in Queensland, particularly under the Beattie Bligh governments, where they sold Queensland Rail, they sold the Golden Casket, they sold the Port of Brisbane for 6 times earnings. They've sold most of our airports, most of our ports, and so on and so on. So we've had, and federally we've seen CSL privatised, we've seen the Commonwealth Bank privatised, we saw state governments, the old SGIO privatised. All of these particular pieces of infrastructure were there to serve you, the people. And the people who worked in the government were known as public servants because they were there to serve the people. Of course, what we now have today is we've seen, in relative terms, a diminishing of front-end workers, but a very rapidly increasing percentage of bureaucrats. And of course, bureaucrats don't serve you, they control you, they introduce regulation. And we've seen that because what's happened as they've sold all this infrastructure, they've marched on into the family home, the classroom, the bedroom, the corporate boardroom through superannuation, of course the doctor's waiting room through COVID. And I think COVID and the way the government carried on about the treatment of people in COVID, basically woke many people up to just how unhinged many of our bureaucrats are. Because while it might be difficult to argue about climate change, we're not necessarily all climate scientists to understand thermodynamics. I think we can all understand that if someone's been repeatedly told for 2 years, take the vaccine, it's safe and effective, and when they get injured, the government starts gaslighting them and continues to tell you, and 10 million people catch COVID, and they keep trying to double down on the same narrative, it's very easy to tell that they're not really being honest and displaying integrity in looking after people. It was all about protecting their own vested interests and their own narrative. So that's why I ran for politics. Look, a little bit about myself. I grew up in Chinchilla, a town west of Brisbane, about 280 kilometres west of Brisbane. Grew up on a farm, son of a farmer and a nurse. Chinchilla, went in the 70s and 80s, had its own maternity ward. We had our own council. Since I left home, we've lost our maternity ward, we've lost our council. That's despite the fact Chinchilla's at the centre of the Surat gas basin, so we've generated lots of revenue there. We've had Coden Creek Power Station built just down the road. So despite the fact that, like many of you up here will appreciate, the regions do not get the money back that they generate. It goes to Brisbane or Canberra and it never comes back. So that has always driven me in the sense that I believe in equality, and I think we've got to look after the goose that lays the golden egg. When it comes to Australia, that is without a doubt regional Australia, and it's completely wrong. I've just spent the week driving up Bruce Highway, and the number of potholes and everything. I got trapped on the Bruce Highway just north of Gympie when I left home on Saturday morning because the Sunshine Coast had 6 inches of rain. And you're like, that's barely outside the south, still in the southeast corner. So you guys up here, you're getting road closures and all this stuff. And just the idea of hitting a pothole, some of these potholes at 100 kilometres an hour, and when you're driving on oncoming semi-trailers, the fact that you have to encounter this stuff day in, day out in the 21st century is just completely absurd. And of course, we have issues with ambulance ramping and so on that, I won't need to explain to you. So we need to do something about this. and to do something about it, we need to understand how we got into this problem, and then we need to reverse, some of the decisions that were made decades ago that have taken decades to flow through. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown, and so tonight, just so you know, so what I'll do tonight is I'm going to mainly focus on the economics, and the reason why I'm doing that is because nothing controls you more than money. Money controls you even more than the government does, right? And that's very, very important. And if we want to get the government out of our lives, we need to have more disposable income. We need to have more personal wealth. You take, for example, in the COVID issues, I mean, if people had a house and a couple $100 grand in the bank, they may have been able to say, no, I'm not going to take the jab, I'll sit it out. But when you've got a mortgage and you've got to pay your bills and everything like that, your children's school bills or whatever, you don't have that same same choice, the freedom of choice that you do when you're struggling with a mortgage. So I want to talk about how we got into that situation first of all, and then I'll talk about our solutions. First of all, as you know, we've got government. Government's too big, and one of the first things I called for when in my maiden speech was I originally called it a constitution convention, but I've changed it to Federation Convention because there's things we can change without having to change the constitution. But we have got to decrease the size of government in this country. We do not need 2 schools, 2 hospitals, 2 environment departments, etc., etc. Now, one of the reasons why this has come about was that in 1983, Bob Hawke took the Tasmanian to government to the High Court over the Franklin Dam. Because what had happened was the federal government declared the Franklin Dam in Tasmania a World Heritage, whatever that's called, a World Heritage Site. Now, in the Constitution, 5129, it says that effectively a federal government's responsible for foreign treaties. So Hawke argued that because we've signed a treaty with the United Nations that this is a World Heritage Site, that we have more power over the dam building than what state government does. And the High Court agreed with that. Now the problem with that is that as a result of that decision, we've had hardly any dams built in Australia since then. And the reason for that is that every time the state government wants to build a dam, the environmental activists will use the Environmental Defenders Office, which is funded by the state government. Is anyone looking for a fee?
I got one for Margaret and one for Lynn. You back row.
So what happened, we saw it with the Darnie, for example. There was some rare finish that no one had ever heard of. The Environmental Defenders Office tried to claim through to the federal EPBC, the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Act department, that you couldn't build a coal mine because of this particular finch. So what's happened is, and we saw it again last year, now this has happened for the last 34 years, we saw it again last year, a gold mining company, a mining company, paid the New South Wales government $190 million to get the environmental approvals for a gold mine. They got the approvals, then under cultural heritage laws on grounds, Tanya Plibersek overrid that. Right, now I don't know about you, but if I paid $190 million to the state government to get approvals for something and then the federal government overrid that decision, I would expect the federal government to reimburse me, wouldn't you? But that's not the case. So we have now got so not only do we have 2 bureaucracies where we're paying twice the amount of wages that we need to, the 2 levels of regulation is actually choking industry in this country. Here in Queensland since the 80s, we've literally only had the 1 dam built, which is Paradise Dam, and just about any other dam will be stopped, not by the state government wants to build it, but by the federal government, because as you know, the bureaucrats in Canberra have a different outlook on the world than what we do, because they don't have to, they get a high salary and everything like that. So that decision was that's one of the reasons that's led to our decline in productivity since the 80s. 1985, so I'm going through the 80s here, Paul Keating lifted capital controls. Now, if I described human capital, immigration as human capital, you would probably relate to this easier. So we know that the federal government has made immigration, basically after COVID, they relaxed human capital controls for immigration, and they've let over 500,000 immigrants come in. A similar thing happened with that in regards to financial capital in 1985. In 1985, the 4 major banks had $8 billion in foreign debt. By 2008, they had $800 billion in foreign debt that they borrowed from overseas. That money was lent to people like you and me to buy a house. But what that did was it drove up house prices from 3 to 4 times earnings to 10 to 12 times earnings. And what that did was then when you've got, you've got such a big mortgage, you've then got to send 2 parents back to work. Did any of you people out there go to childcare in the 1980s, 1970s? No, there was no childcare back then, was there? The childcare industry is a result of this decision in 1985. In 2008 there was a GFC, and this is when the foreign debt had peaked out. There was a lot of people lost money through Storm Financial, and a number of other financial companies. So in order to stop the housing market from collapsing because retirees were going to have to sell the house to pay off their debts, basically they propped up the housing market by allowing foreign students to buy houses here. Now, foreign students have only taken off. The number of foreign students in this country have only risen since that decision in 2008, because that's all the result of that decision in 1985. So what we need to do is actually reintroduce capital controls and tie the amount of money that you lend out to the amount of savings. So when I worked at the Bank of Queensland, for example, for every $1 million we lent out, only $400,000 came from savings here in Australia. We would go offshore and borrow another $600,000. Right now, before capital controls were introduced, all the Bank of Queensland could do as a savings bank was lend what people had saved. And what you save is a function of your earnings. So if you could only lend what the people had saved, you keep a link between the house of a price and earnings. And so, for example, if I take my boys to pay them $5 to mow the lawn, they go to the comic book shop. The most they can pay for that comic book is $5. If I give them a loan for $20, they can now pay $25, and instead of taking a week to pay that comic off, or they didn't have to pay that comic off because they were living within their means, they've now got a debt that goes for 4 weeks. So this is effectively what happened when we lifted capital controls in 1985. People aren't aware of it, but we have become dependent on foreign capital, right, or foreign debt. And it's a bit like many of you relate to this with the energy market. We are shutting down our domestically produced energy supplies like coal, and we are importing foreign-made renewables 75% owned by foreigners. Okay, and that is complete madness. So we did that with immigration with capital markets in 1985, and we now rely too heavily on foreign debt. Same thing, and so same year, 1985, there was another very destructive decision made by the Hawke Keating government. A bloke by the name of John Button, Senator John Button. Now, he effectively introduced the Button Plan, whereby he lifted the tariffs on Australian manufacturing because he felt as though we couldn't compete. So he just said, well, right, he didn't say we'll let manufacturing go offshore, but effectively the result of lifting tariffs and no longer protecting our manufacturing industry meant that manufacturing did go offshore. Now, the problem is when manufacturing went offshore, our skill base has declined as a result of that, because obviously if you've got a manufacturing industry, you have a lot more people working as mechanics, tradies, boilermakers, machinists and whatever. 40 years on from that decision, that last generation that were trained up while we still had a manufacturing industry, they're retiring. And we aren't getting the same ratio of people who are on the tools coming through to replace these people that are retiring. That is why, along with the mining boom, albeit the mining boom does suck a lot of people out as well, but we therefore have to import a lot of immigrants. Now, a lot of those immigrants aren't even actually on the tools, they're students, and a lot of those immigrants who are coming in on the tools are not even building houses, they're building renewables. So there's, I just was contacted by someone a few weeks ago saying that there's about 300 Filipinos working on the transmission line between New South Wales and South Australia. So a lot of these people who are coming on the working visas aren't even working on building houses, which is what we really need. So that's a real issue. So take that decision in 85, then you go to 1990, the Dawkins Plan. I don't know if you can remember that one. That was basically John Dawkins, then Education Minister, said we're going to allow students to go to university, we're going to pay for them, not by just free education, which will be, I think people should pay for their education, but they're going to lend the money to them. And of course what's happening is that now students are graduating, instead of finishing, some of them finishing at 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, are finishing university 21, 22, 23. They're finishing with a lot of head step, So they're starting life already on the back foot. Whereas say 40 years ago, you could say finish school at 15, get a trade, by the time you're 25 or 30, you'd have half your house paid off and probably paid off fully by the time you're 40. So that decision has delayed the entry of our children into the workforce and actually then also loaded them up with debt before they even get into the workforce. So they're starting off on the back foot, much older. So this is why, don't forget, we've doubled the house, doubled or trebled the house of prices relative to incomes, and they're now starting on the back foot. Now, if that wasn't hard enough, 1992, Keating came along and decided to introduce compulsory superannuation. Does anyone know the result of that referendum in 1992 when he introduced compulsory referendum? Where he said to the people, by 2025, I'm going to take 12% of your income and give it to someone you've never met. There's no guarantee you're going to get it back when you're 67. Now, anyone know what the result of that referendum was? There was no referendum, was there? Because if Paul Keating had actually said, I'm going to take 12% of your wages and give it to someone you've never met in Sydney or Melbourne, do you think you would have voted for it? Absolutely not. New Zealand had a referendum on compulsory superannuation in 1997. Do you know what that result was? 92% to 8 against. So most people don't want the government taking their money, but that's exactly what happened here because Keating introduced it at 2%. So over the years, it's slowly creeping up and we'll hit 12% July 1 this year. So if you're a person, if you're someone on a median wage today, if you're say starting off like our children are, on say $80,000, you need $50,000 to live on, you'll pay $20,000 in tax, you've got $10,000 left to save. Where's that going? 12% of 80,000, 9,600 or 96% of your savings is going down to Sydney and Canberra, right? To be managed by those guys in the ivory palaces down there, financial engineers, right? Because we've replaced our mechanical engineers and our civil engineers when we sold our infrastructure, and we basically shut down our manufacturing industry and we replaced them with financial engineers. Okay, so and so this has restricted the ability of our children to save for a house. Right? Now, it's all very well saying that superannuation generates a 7% return. That's all right. I'm not going to argue with that. That's not a bad effort over the last 30 years. But here's the problem. How much the house price has risen by the last 30 years? About 7% as well, haven't they? Higher. Okay. Well, and here's the thing. If you do, say, earn $100,000 in your own name and you've got investments that you might say $10,000 in investment income, if you want, in order to keep up with the 7% house price growth, you've got to generate 10% pre-tax to get 7% after tax. But here's the thing, when you're starting off in life, you don't have enough in your investment, so the house costs $1 million, or say $500,000. You don't start off with $500,000, so you might be getting a 10% return on your $10,000 in savings, right, which will give you $100,000 in savings. Let's say $100,000, you might get $10,000 back. But the house has grown, is $500,000 and grown by 7%. So you're falling behind the whole time. And this is, if you're wondering why, and what else has been growing by about, maybe not 7%, but what party didn't exist 30 years ago that exists today? The Greens. And I'll tell you why they exist, because they are making inroads into young people, because young people can't get a home. And if you want our children to grow up with a sense of pride and ownership in this country, we have to give them a home. Now, ironically enough, it was the Hawke Keating government that introduced these, what they call neoliberal or economic rationalist policies, right? Well, actually, Super wasn't. The economic rationalist policies was the 85 ones, and then they started bringing the communism with superannuation. But Howard didn't really stop it either. He should have stopped superannuation if it was only 3% of earnings. He didn't. He let it go to 9%. He also brought in the baby bonus, he brought in the first home buyers grant, he introduced national curriculum, he banned nuclear energy, and he's wasted a lot of money sending our troops off to the Iraq war, which really, if they had been building Bruce Highway, we were involved in Iraq and Afghanistan for 20 years, we would have been better off just working on building up a military engineering corps, a civil military engineering corps in the military, so that if we're ever invaded and someone drops a bomb on our roads, we've got an engineering corps within the military that can rebuild our roads quickly, right? Well, and that's where we are today. If we want to rebuild and bring our skills back in, we are literally going to have to increase the size of our military engineering corps to introduce the skills and the discipline required to do it. So that's where we're at today. I mean, to be fair to Howard, he did pay the debt off, albeit he sold Telstra to do it, but and a couple of other things. But to be fair to Howard, he did pay the debt off, and by 2007 we had no debt. But in the last 18 years, incredibly, we've gone from zero debt to $1 trillion in debt. And that, of course, was helped along by Julia Gillard when she introduced NDIS, and both the reckless spending throughout the GFC by Kevin Rudd and then, when Rudd spent in 2007, everyone thought it was reckless, but compared to what happened in COVID, that was nothing compared to what happened in COVID, which we'll take questions on COVID and climate change in question time. But so that's where we're at today. So how are we actually going to unwind this mess that we're in? Because this is really, really important if we want to get our country back on track. And we need politicians who actually have solutions to these problems. Okay, the best solution I can give you, the most important decision we do, is that we go back to controlling the volume of credit in the system. Now, you might know what that means. In 1937, there was a Banking Royal Commission, and one of the recommendations of this Royal Commission, it said the central bank should always control the volume of credit in the system. In 1985, Paul Keating did to the finance markets what Chris Bowen is doing to the energy markets, which is allowing foreigners to come in here using their foreign-made renewables, and they're the ones, 75% ownership of these renewables is by foreigners. So, in other words, when we've gone from 14 million people in 1985 to almost 28 million people today, we have doubled the size of the balance sheet. So we've got any accountants or people who know what balance sheets look like in the room here? Okay, good. So over here we've got a balance sheet. Over here we've got an asset. Okay, that asset is now twice as big as what it was in 1985, 28 million people versus 14. For every debit, there's a credit, right? So the asset's a debit. The credit is what's known as capital. Now there's two types of capital. There's debt and there's equity. When the Royal Commission into banking said the central bank should always control the volume of credit, it is up to the Reserve Bank to basically determine how we expand our balance sheet. Now there's two ways to do that, debt and equity. Keating in 1985 overturned that decision of the Royal Commission and said we're going to rely on foreign debt. Now that is probably the most treasonous act by any treasurer in this country, and I'll explain why. In the 1980s, you know how many of you people actually go along with the climate change narrative? Anyone? No. Okay. No one here at all? Okay, fair enough. I thought I might have got someone here. Okay, so we've seen our children brainwashed by this type of rubbish, right? We saw them brainwashed in COVID. Many of us were brainwashed in the 1980s. I was one of them. I was told that you can't print money out of thin air. Right, so I did a Bachelor of Commerce at University of Queensland in the late 80s, and I've also done a Master's in Tax Law as well as a Master's in Applied Finance. But we were told that you cannot print money out of thin air. Now, that is an oxymoronic statement. All money, or all credit, remember money is just a form of credit on that balance sheet, right? It is just a form of credit. What enables countries, there's a term called exorbitant privilege. Okay, and what that is that gives a country the power to issue its own credit, right? Now, if I was to say, who we got up here, BHP, don't really own it, let's just say it's BHP. If BHP came out tomorrow and on the stock exchange they announced that they were going to issue new shares to build a new coal mine, no one would bat an eyelid, would they? That's because what ASX listed companies do, they issue new shares. No one ever says to them, oh, well, you can't issue new shares out of thin air, do they? Okay, so how come governments don't issue new shares out of thin air to build infrastructure? You know why? Yes, it is in their interest. It's very much in their interest. It's in the people's interest. Yeah, well, it's in the bank's interest who control the government. But why don't they do it? Because they've been brainwashed by the narrative. Just like we saw them brainwashed by the narrative in COVID, they've been brainwashed. Right, so what we do today, if we build a dam for $1 billion, we will go offshore and we will borrow $1 billion offshore to build that dam. That means the first $1 billion in wealth we create, we have to repay offshore. It then means the next, the interest we pay on that loan, so let's say 25 years at 4%, also has to go offshore. So we've just put ourselves into $1 billion of debt to build a dam right? And we're going to lose out of it $2 billion up front. Okay, does that make sense? All because of the way we've structured capital markets. Now, our solution is to have an infrastructure bank in Canberra. The federal government will issue one share and call it untapped wealth. And we will create an infrastructure bank with that, and that infrastructure bank owned by you, the Australian people, will issue infrastructure bonds to the state governments to build 7 sovereign assets: dams, power stations, tunnels, railway lines, ports, airports and telecommunications, right? So we know that state governments, we saw this with the Bjelke-Petersen government when they built the Bowen coal deposits and the train lines, the power stations, the dams, that all started generating lots of wealth. You build a dam, you start irrigating, it increases land values. You build a dam, you get hydro energy, increase the supply of energy. You build power stations, increase the supply of energy, you start generating recurring revenue. You build railway lines, you start generating recurring revenue. Right? What we do at the moment is when we build assets, we let the wealth from those assets go offshore. Now people will turn around and say, Rennick, you can't print money out of thin air, that's irresponsible, it's going to cause inflation. First of all, it's not irresponsible if you secure it against other assets that come out of thin air. So what's the assets that come out of thin air if you're a sovereign nation? Resources, the soil and the minerals in the soil, water, rain and the sunlight. And if you mix those 3 ingredients with what? You get wealth. What do you mix those 3 ingredients with? Toil. Thank you very much. We sing that every time in the national anthem. Wealth for toil. It's not wealth for foreign debt, is it? No. But that's exactly what we're doing now. We use foreign debt. Because the key point is when you issue a loan, you've got to secure it against an asset. So if you're a farmer and you go to the bank and you want $1 million loan, the bank's going to turn around and say, no, we want the farmer's collateral. If you're a worker, you want a $500,000 loan, they'll say we need your house as collateral, right? That's called secured lending, right? What this will be secured lending that over the course of 50 years that the state government will repay to the federal government. So eventually, even though you're expanding the volume of credit initially through an infrastructure bond, as the earnings from that dam comes back to the state government, and then that, like through increased land tax or they build power stations where they start generating revenue, they'll pay down the debt, and that debt, so we'll eventually turn that debt off, but we'll turn the debt back into equity, because that's what we are, isn't it? So on that balance sheet, if over here, if I've got to say I've got a tractor, and you're the auditor, what are you going to look for? You're going to look for a tractor, aren't you? Over here, if I say I've got debt and equity, what are you going to look for? What's the instrument? What's the real thing that underlines debt and equity? Well, yeah, that's what it's secured against, but what is debt and equity? What is it? It's a legal document, right? Debt is a mortgage. What's equity? What's the legal document that we call equity? Someone's going to ask a question about this tonight, I'm sure of it. Titles. Exactly. What's a sovereign country? What's a sovereign country? It's title. It's title over 7 million square kilometres, we call Australia. All the rain that falls out of the sky, all the sunlight that comes out of the sky and all the soil in it. So why do we switch around when we do that, borrow $1 million? Why do we give $1 billion of our untapped wealth to foreign banks? Why do we do that? Because our government has sold us out, just like they've sold us out with renewable energy. So we have to go back and actually start building infrastructure, funding it through our sovereign equity, which was given to us. Who gave us that equity, by the way, that title? Where'd that come from? Came from Federation, but who? No, it wasn't the monarch. Yeah, it's all right. No, that's okay. No, they did not give us. We built it. Our forefathers built it. They bled for it. It came out of blood, sweat and tears. Okay? That's why we have to hold on to it, because every time we let that title go offshore to foreign banks, we're selling our children out. We're selling them short. We're leaving them with nothing in the cupboard. Our forefathers left us wonderful infrastructure assets. They left us a prosperous life, a pluralist society whereby we could all have a bit of a laugh at ourselves, and we're losing that. Right? So we owe it to our children to do this. And who was the first guy in Australia to do what I just suggested? Has it ever been done before in Australia, what I'm suggesting? It's been done, the first time it was done in 1810 by a bloke by the name of Lachlan Macquarie. For the first 17 years of the colony, they relied on foreign currency. There was a drought in 1805, the currency got repatriated and there was no currency left in the colony. What did that lead to? Not quite. Before that, there was a period between it. The rum rebellion. So basically they started bartering rum, and as you know, it's not a good idea to start bartering rum because your problem with rum is you drink it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, depending on what time of day of the week it is and what time of the night, but it's not a way to run a colony. You can't trade rum, right? Because, ultimately you drink it. So anyway, that ended up a rum rebellion. And the colony nearly didn't survive as a result of that. And Lachlan Macquarie was the first governor to come to Australia. He saw Australia as he was the first governor to see Australia as a country, not a colony. And that meant that he knew if you want to run a country, you've got to have a military to provide law and order, you've got to have a tax system, and you've got to have a monetary system. He introduced the holy dollar, which was just a Spanish peso with a dump, like a little bit taken out of it. That was called the dump. And with that money, he funded the construction of Sydney Hospital and the Sydney Barracks. So those of you familiar with Sydney, there's still a standing Macquarie Street today. Okay. So he's used his own sovereign credit to fund this rather than going to foreign debt, because no other country was going to lend money to a colony, were they? Okay, now who uses that holy dollar as its logo today? Macquarie Bank. And what's their business model? They're the ones that clipped the ticket on all of the infrastructure that was privatised. Were they around 50 years ago? Nope. They've only become the millionaires factory because they're our Judases who have effectively clipping the ticket on our infrastructure assets becoming millionaires off our parents, what our parents and our forefathers bequeathed to us. So we have sold out. I mean, to be fair to Macquarie, they've gone offshore. They've basically taken their business model and gone offshore using Australian superannuation money. A few weeks ago, I did a post when Kevin Rudd invited his old mate Swanee over to the States and a heap of industry fund managers at Macquarie Bank to go over there and start using our money that we pay into superannuation to start buying assets in the United States. It'd be a nice idea if they used the money, some of that money to actually build the Bruce Highway, wouldn't it? Like keep the Bruce Highway up. But that's how, yet again, just another example of how the federal government has sold us out. So that is the only way we have to reform ourselves structurally. Now, that's actually one of our 5 key policies, that infrastructure bank. In that same policy grouping, we want to bring back a public bank. Many of you will be old enough to remember the Commonwealth Bank. I'm a big believer that if we had a public bank in every town, those private banks would never have closed their branches. The other thing is, if we've got a public bank, your loans, you can have longer fixed-term home loans. Some of you might remember a time when you can go get a home loan for 15 or 20 years, and you can fix your rate for 15 or 20 years. We really want our parents to be able to get a decent rate, say 4%, fix it for 15 or 20 years so they're not being controlled by the RBA. Because if you have a short-term home loan, they can really, when they manipulate those interest rates every first month, on the first Tuesday of every month, that can really impact your ability to deal with cost of living. And of course, who suffered the most? I mean, we all know about the vaccine injuries and the mandates and everything, but throughout COVID, when they lowered interest rates down to 0.1, they expanded the credit bubble, and then they went and jacked up interest rates 14 times, punishing hard-working Australians. Right? I mean, this is a complete cop-out, right? So what they did was, inflation's a relative figure where demand, it's a measure of the difference between demand and supply. So here's demand, obviously greater than supply. What they've done, the RBA, is actually imposed an austerity measure through highest interest rates to lower demand. What they should have done was impose a productivity measure through the infrastructure bank to increase the supply of goods and services. And this is how when they say you can't print money because it's going to increase inflation, that's not true. Yes, if you print money and spend it, that increases demand, that will increase inflation. But if you print and build more power stations, build more dams, you'll supply more energy, supply more food, build better roads, you'll supply goods and services faster, you'll push down the price of inflation. So anyway, we want our Commonwealth, we want a bank back, we want a public bank back. And the other thing we want back is a national government or a government insurance office like we used to have with SUAO. 50% of your insurance costs include reinsurance costs paid offshore. Okay? Australia has only 28 million people, a lot of natural disasters per head of population, so the foreign-owned reinsurance companies rip us off. Okay, and we need to stop that from happening because the federal government can just reinsure itself. right? And if it did that and lowered the cost of insurance for everyone, we'd bring more people back into the insurance pool, and that would make insurance cheaper. So that's our monetary policy, and that's one of our really key significant policies. The second policy we want is to deal with the cost of living. I want to lift the tax-free threshold to $40,000. Currently, if you earn $18,200, you pay 16 cents, soon to be 14 cents in a dollar. But long story short, if you earn $40,000 today, you pay $3,500 in tax. You also pay about $5,000 in super. So you'd be lucky to live for less than 40 grand today, and probably, to be honest, more like 50 grand. But let's just assume it's 40 grand. You're paying 3.5 grand tax, 5 grand in super. Suddenly you're below the cost of living, what you need to just live on. So if you get a flat tyre, or you can't afford your car registration, or you can't afford the rent, you might lose your job because you can't drive to work. Or if you suddenly become homeless because you can't afford the rent, how are you going to have a shower and shave and a decent night's sleep to turn up to work? Right? I think it's completely unfair that the tax system in this country taxes people below the cost of living. If businesses can get a tax deduction for doing business, fair enough. People should get at least not have to pay tax below the cost of living. Because those people on low incomes who get out of bed and put their nose to the grindstone, I would back them in any day rather than someone that could choose to stay in bed, smoke dope and get a heap of government handouts. We want to keep these people, climbing the ladder of opportunity. And I can tell you, as someone who grew up on a farm, grew up watermelon picking, grew up working in bars and things like that, I worked just as hard as when I was on a low income, if not harder, than what I did when I became executive in those ivory palaces. If anything, I actually didn't work anywhere near as hard when I was an executive in those ivory palaces. So we really want to look after our low income earners, because we want them to get ahead and keep their nose, keep their head above the water, right? That's going to be an expensive policy. 14 million people work in this country, 12 million earn more than $40,000. So that policy is going to cost $40 billion. How are we going to pay for it? We want a means test the defined benefit scheme for retired bureaucrats, which currently costs about $10 billion a year. I'm not talking about, just to be clear here, I'm not talking about the military defined benefit scheme or the military pension. I'm not talking about vested contributions where you paid your own money in, and I'm not talking about the state defined benefit scheme, which is for teachers and nurses, for those that are still left in it. Okay, I'm being very specific about the defined benefit scheme for bureaucrats who get a fixed percentage of their final income. A good example of that is a bloke by the name of David Anderson, the managing director of the ABC. He's just recently resigned as the managing director. He's been paid over $1 million for the last 7 years. His defined benefit is 37% of his final salary, which is over $400,000 a year. He's only 56. He can get another job if he wants to. He still gets that benefit. So he will, if he lives to 86, get 30 years by $400,000. That's $12 million, despite the fact he would be a multi-millionaire already for being paid over $1 million a year. So that type of largesse we need to get rid of, and we can save $10 billion there. The other thing we want to do is get rid of subsidies for renewables, which we estimate will cost about will save us $5 or $6 billion. And the third thing we want to do is actually look at removing the duplications of roles and responsibilities of state and federal governments. We don't need 2 education departments, we don't need 2 health departments, we don't need 2 water departments, environment departments, energy departments, AEMO for example. We don't need 2 tourism departments. There are a lot of departments in Canberra that we can get rid of, the climate change department, all of that stuff can go, right? So we don't need to be a rocket scientist to find $5 billion to take out of the public service. And look, I think you can actually find a lot more, to be honest. But I think it's fair to say, if that gets us to 20 billion, which is half the cut. Treasury don't model secondary impacts. What that means is they assume that if you give a $3,000 tax cut to someone on less than $40,000, that none of that money comes back to Treasury in the next year. That's completely ridiculous. Most of the money that you give as a tax cut when you've got inflation running at 4 or 5% will be completely consumed by at least 75% of income earners, percent of income earners in this country up to 150 or 200 grand. I mean, maybe if you're on $1 million, you might save the extra $3,500, but most people will need that money just to survive. So we're going to model a 50% return back to Treasury within the first year, and that's how we're going to pay for it. The next 2 policies, we want to pay childcare directly to the parents. As Felicity said before, she stayed at home because she felt raising her children was one of the most important jobs you can do. And we believe we want to make sure that we keep the parent and the child and the bond between the parent and child very close. But we also want to acknowledge that there's a lot of people out there that can't even get access to childcare because they're shift workers and they work on weekends. You know, like if you're a nurse or a policeman and you're working till 10 o'clock at night, the childcare centre doesn't open until then, right? They've got to go and find a nanny maybe or you know, tee up their shifts with their partner or whatever to make sure someone's home. If you work on weekends, I've got a mate who plays in a band, he's a wedding band singer, makes a living out of it actually. Don't ask me how, but he, as he said, he has to get a nanny on the weekend and he doesn't get any support for that. So if we can pay childcare vouchers to the parents. So vouchers will be for childcare, paying off the family home and food, not grogs or anything like that. So it will be, you know, we're not just giving bad parents, you know, who would spend it on gambling or grog, they're not going to be able to do that, right? We just want to give greater flexibility to the system. You know, if you're a fly-in, fly-out worker, why should you pay for childcare if you're home? You might be out 7 days, 10 days and then home 7 days or 5 days. That's your weekend. Why are you paying? Because often with childcare centres, you've got to book a whole term. Why are you paying for childcare when you don't need it, right? So there's that policy, and that will also hopefully encourage some parents to stay at home a little bit longer. I stayed at home for a few years. I'm happily married father of 3. I stayed home for a few years when my children were young. I would go to mother's group on a Tuesday morning, yeah, many mothers would go back to work when their children were young, and even though the mothers did want to go back to work eventually, they didn't want to go back to work when their children were so young. You know, they wanted to wait until they were more, you know, maybe in late primary school, secondary school. So if we can make it easier for parents to stay at home, that would be great as well. And the last policy is I want to make superannuation voluntary. Superannuation has been one of the worst economic decisions of the last 30 years. As I explained before, it's a false economy. Sure, you can generate a decent rate of return out of it, but it's not working. Today, 40% of people retire with a mortgage. That's up from 10% in 1992 when it was first introduced. Because, you know, as I explained before, house prices are rising faster than the amount of money that you can save, right? So if they're rising, you know, in super or outside of super, so you're falling behind. And here's the other thing, 50% of retirees today are still on a full pension. So that figure has not moved in 33 years. It's not quite fully matured yet, super, but after 33 years, if you look up the ASPA superannuation figures, women aged 60 to 64 have a median balance of $158,000. So that's not even halfway towards getting off the pension. So if you're a single woman on the pension, or if you're a single retiree, doesn't male or female, you don't even start to lose the pension until you get to $312,000. So men's median balance is about $212,000. So median is where the halfway line is, 50% above, 50% below. So we're not even getting the low income earners off the pension. We'd be much better off letting the low income earners hold on to their superannuation so that they can live better throughout their working career and just increase the pension so that they can have a decent pension. Now, I know some of you will say, well, we have to, you know, people have to save for their own retirement and, you know, all of that sort of stuff. That's true, you do have to save for your own retirement. I agree with that. But the reality is that people on a median balance, as I pointed out before, if you're on $80,000, you're going to need nearly all of that to live. You might be able to save $10,000 a year if you're lucky to pay your house off. You know, it's almost virtually impossible if you've been on a median balance or below to ever save up enough money and not need the pension. You may be lucky to inherit some money. But at the end of the day, and those ones who are irresponsible with their money, and I saw this when I worked in tax business services, if they got $100,000 when they retired and they'd never seen that much money before, do you think they held on to it? No, they went and spent it either on a holiday or a boat. They might, you know, increase the, you know, add an extension, a garage or whatever to their house, but they spend it anyway. And, you know, look, fair enough, they earned it. My view is I'm happy to have a pension out there as a safety net. If you want more than that, then you save hard throughout your life. You go and get degrees and everything like that, or you know, so be careful and work hard and you can get ahead. So there are our 5 key policies. I'll leave it at that. We'll have a break for 15 minutes so we can all heat ourselves. And we'll come back and say 10 to 8, and we'll take some questions from the floor. I will run a raffle. I'm going to raffle a t-shirt with a People First t-shirt with a signature. So we will be taking, if you want to buy a raffle ticket outside, that'd be great as well. Okay, cheers. We'll see you in 20 minutes.
Can you guys hear me? Sorry. I've been talking and turns out I guess nobody could hear me. I thought you guys could. Sorry. I've been talking about a whole bunch of stuff and nobody could hear me. I'm guessing you can hear me now. Sorry, I can't get the video camera to work. So what I was saying is, let's repeat it all. Another bloody mistake. I had my mouse die on me. Everything's going pear-shaped at the moment. For some reason, the camera doesn't work. It's just coming up, green. It is what it is. Look, Senator Rennick's page here, just type, people first, .au apparently is the way it goes. Come back, yeah, just people first party.au. Drop them a line. Good to see that we've got a few people here. Felicity definitely wants some help. Reach out to her if you can. If you're not sure on how to get a hold of her, drop us a line at NQ Freedom Network. That's why I had the email up there. Yeah, definitely had a couple of sips. I'll say sips again. All right, trying to run everything at the same time today. That's good. You can hear me now. Awesome. Thank you, Clark. Also wanted to say a big shout out and thanks to all the trolls. You guys are awesome. So much fun. It's good to know that we build such a great bridge that you guys want to live under it and that you guys are sadly living out such pathetic lives that, the only thing you've got to do on a Saturday night is to come in and troll these things. So, wow, what a bleak and pointless existence you must have. I really do feel sorry for you. But anyway, well, what I was saying is I don't quite understand why, StreamYard has suddenly decided to charge the prices that they've suddenly decided to charge, which is more than twice what they charged last year. As you can see, the Aussie dollar hasn't really shifted that much to warrant such a change. We're only moving in the cents over the last few years, so it's not that big of an issue that I can see. So anyway, just wanted to shout out to Oliver, who's back in Townsville. We're going to get Oliver on the podcast soon. Shout out to Glenn. Say g'day, because I've seen you've texted me here, buddy. I'm assuming you're watching in some capacity because you usually are, mate. So shout out to you and a sips to you, brother. One thing I did want to point out too, let's see if we can present it, is just how packed it was at this event. It was amazing. Like that, sadly, people were being turned away because there weren't enough spaces for them. Possibly not the best setup. You are a green screen. Yes, it's a green screen in development. So just have a look at some of these comments. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's have a look. Let's remove that. Hey, now I'm a giant green screen. Woohoo! Isn't this exciting stuff, ladies and gentlemen? Just give me a second. I'll just give you a quick look. This is the packed room. All right. Now, and behind us, in this room, should this video ever come up, it seems to be having a bit of trouble. Everything's not working today, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really sorry. We're having a few tech difficulties. Police, g'day, Queensland Police Surveillance Drone and Hidden Network. Hello, I see. ASIO is AWOL today. Maybe they weren't expecting it. They got to book in advance, I guess. Wow, this whole thing has just shit itself. Wait, what is going on? Hey, look, we got the camera working again. Hey, okay, cool. Something good came out of it. Actually, sorry, that crashed for a second there. I just had to quickly fix it. I'm back. I'm here. Sips. Something working. Everything broke, but we got it functioning again. All right, see if I can present that video now. Share video. Open up. Let's see if it'll work. Or is it going to crash again? Uh-oh. Okay. It doesn't like that video. It obviously some of the compression from the way I've sent it didn't work. Look, we won't worry about it. Look, just believe me, the room was packed. We had to turn people away. So hopefully this video has helped those people who unfortunately got turned away. But behind us, like there was like little holes, because it's a kind of like an outdoorish sort of area, and you could see through some of the ventilation holes and whatnot. People were actually watching from outside looking in, so because it was that packed, which is really amazing. Let's see, where were we? Somebody did ask, and okay, yeah, did you film any in the question and answer? Yes, I did. I just have I have to do a little bit of editing on that one. I've got to do some blurring and cut a couple little pieces out. A couple of people requested that certain things were not seen, since logos on shirts, and one guy told a really amazing story that I hope to get one day. I had a good yarn to him. You'll see he's the guy with the blurred out face. He's currently in the midst of working on something, and you'll learn more about it hopefully tomorrow when I get it all sorted. I've just got a few things to sort out there. Yes, here I am. I'm back. Sorry. All the bits and pieces of tech things don't always work. Yeah. So that was a bit of Saturday night pleasure for everybody. I've mostly finished the editing. I was kind of trying to edit that whilst running comments today while this was going. So who knows what Friday 13th. ASIO too busy letting China infiltrate every digital aspect. I love that, Clark. Well done, mate. Good job. So yeah, look, I don't know what you guys thought, but I really enjoyed that presentation. I think it's really good, and some of the question and answer stuff is really good too. We'll get into that at some stage tomorrow. I'm not sure exactly how things are going to pan out. I'm making tomorrow up as I go along. Big shout out to Ben Manderson and Adrian Cahill. I just went and did some neurolinguistic programming with this evening, which is why I was a little bit later getting things sorted. Great bunch of guys. Hopefully get them, or one or both, in the next couple of weeks to actually talk about what we've been doing in neurolinguistic programming, what that means, and all the rest. If you're in Townsville and you're interested in such things, we'll hook you up. There's only limited 10 spaces available for the next one, and I will be taking one of them. So that leaves us with 9. So yeah, if it's something you're interested in for a self-help sort of thing, let us know. The links will be up soon for that, and hopefully we'll have a yarn about it. Yeah, I think Rennick's a great bloke. Look, at the end of the day, he's been to Townsville 4 times, and I've caught up with him all 4 times. And yeah, great bloke, always willing to give us the time of day. So that goes a long way in my book, considering, there's certain disgusting elements of the political circus in this town here that wouldn't give me the time of day if their life depended on it, and have openly stated they don't support the North Queensland Freedom Network. So they obviously support slavery and tyranny. And it's the way I interpret their statement. So sips to the freedom lovers, sips to the truth seekers. I do have one question for all you wonderful Twitter viewers out there. There's so many of you out on Twitter. I don't know why so many of you don't comment though. The only comments we got from Twitter today were from a little troll, but I don't know. It's an interesting demographic, really, when you look at it. Like, considering the numbers of Facebook users is a lot smaller than the number of X users, but all the Facebook users are banging away on that keyboard, getting it all sorted. I'm getting texts galore coming through here. I'll sort that out later. So if you're watching this and trying to text me, you're just gonna have to wait. Sorry, guys. He wasn't in. So anyway, I kind of feel like we should just leave it there, really. I think I've made a big enough meal of this with, cameras not working and audio not working, and then trying to put videos up. And, Valerie Frost, g'day. Good to see you, Valerie. It's good to know that we do have the X comments are working for good people, not just the trolls. So thank you for that. And, there's so many things you guys can do to help out, not just, North Queensland Freedom Network, but, Cafe Lockout as a whole, and commenting and clicking the little likes and the heart buttons and all that sort of stuff does a huge thing. It bumps us up in the algorithms, and it appears that we're also being censored by the e-Karen in certain places too. So, the only way to really fight these things is for you, the people, to really share the hell out of this stuff and keep monitoring it, because you might not get notifications and stuff like that. They are actively trying to block us. Cafe Lockdown in particular has been targeted, and a huge assault going against them, or us, I should say, for as long as I've been a part of it, and it just continues to get more painful. So it really does depend on you, the people out there, to help us get this messages out and these videos out. It's up to you guys. We're until we can get more Senator Rennicks and good people like that, working towards actual freedom of speech and protecting Australia and building us the way the senator so well mumbling all my words today, as he so eloquently put in that speech there. We do have a long way to go, up until that point, and even then we're gonna still have to remain vigilant, just because we get enough good people in there to perhaps save this stuff, save our country, doesn't mean we can rest, because I believe that complacency and our she'll be right attitude, as we discussed on Friday, possibly what got us where we are now. We can't continue to be so apathetic to these scenarios. We have to get involved, and it's hard. Like I doing some neuro-linguistic programming today, and there was a lady there who actually turned up just to confront her own social phobia. And I thought, wow, there's a really strong woman here. She's turned up to a room full of strangers, started talking about some personal issues, and obviously to try and help herself develop as a human being, and just gone in and faced that demon, that fear, that phobia. I'm like, wow, that's powerful shit, and that's the kind of thing I hope that all you people out there can hopefully gain from what we're doing here is the ability, the strength, the desire to want to improve yourselves and become that strength that Australia needs, especially right now. We are on the precipice of things going really south, really hard, and we need as many good people hands on deck. I love all you wonderful people watching and commenting and really getting involved in all this sort of stuff. But look, at the end of the day, if we don't do enough, if not enough good people step up and start doing the right thing, running with people like the People First Party, running with any of the other freedom parties, you've got to get in and give it a go, whether you run independent, whether you just get in there and support them, whether you just tack a sign into your front lawn. Obviously stepping up and doing these things, you become a bit of a target. I've certainly become a bit of a target here in Townsville, and it's a small town. You can piss a lot of people off really quickly here, and I've managed to achieve it. So Scouse is a troll, eh? All right, you're done then. So another poor individual that has nothing better to do on a Saturday night. It's a bit sad, really. I mean, I've got a lot of things I'd much rather be doing, but protecting our country and our freedoms, and what the sad thing is, when you're protecting the freedoms of people who don't even understand what you're trying to do and think just being a troll somehow helps. It's mind boggling, much like people getting upset at Elon Musk for saving their tax dollars. It's a strange place. So sips again, ladies and gentlemen. Then we might leave it there for the evening. I got to get back to editing some stuff for you guys tomorrow. Stay tuned. I'm not sure exactly what time things are going to happen. I've got to I do have an appointment to meet first thing in the morning with some people, and a few decisions to make about how much more time I'm going to spend on these things. So, yeah, okay. I think we'll leave it at that. All right, it's late. I'm tired. It's Saturday night. Do consider becoming a Patreon. Big shout out to all the Patreons who have helped out to be able to pay for things. It is getting more and more expensive to do this shit, and we need the software to work. Obviously, drop us a line at NQ Freedom Network at protonmail.com if you want to help out with any of the wonderful politicians we bring forth. If someone resonates with you and you want to try and help them out, or even if you think, hey, look, I really like what Senator Rennick's all about, I want to join his party, I don't know how, drop us a line, I'll see what I can do to help you out. Check out cafelockedout.com, obviously, because we've got really cool stuff there. I think clo.social is probably going to fall to the wind. I'm actually not streaming there anymore. I think it's better off to send to YouTube because it's getting more views there. Not a great many, because PooTube's obviously not the greatest place, but anyway, all that aside, thanks everybody for watching, and by all means, in the description you've got all these links and whatnot, but there's the link tree there for all the other pages and stuff. So if for some reason Facebook isn't working, like it didn't work the other day on the Cafe Locked Out channel, I'll upload that video for the Cafe Locked Out channel on because unfortunately things just didn't work out. I'm not going to point fingers or anything. It just is what it is. In case Friday night I'm always there, so unless I've said otherwise, so check out those links. You can find all the other things. If you see it's not working somewhere else, it might be working somewhere on another place. Your best bet, of course, is Telegram. Telegram is one of the better places because that's where I'll put all the links, PDFs, and all the other stuff. But anyway, I'm just rambling now. So look, thanks heaps everybody for watching. It's always a pleasure seeing all you guys here, and all you regulars who are here all the time. You guys are absolutely amazing. I can't thank you enough for supporting and having your own little conversations and yarns and letting me know who the turd burgling trolls are. We need to point them out. They obviously they need that little spotlight there. Pathetic little worms and all that. Nothing better to do on a Friday night, and all the other things. Imagine being that pathetic. Having no friends. Sad individuals. So thanks heaps, Clark. Hey Tash, good to see some people on X commenting again. I want to see some more of you X viewers commenting, because wow, there's 378 of you on Cafe Locked Out alone, not to mention the 50 plus on North Queensland Freedom Network, which is amazingly outdoing all of the Facebook viewers just on North Queensland Freedom Network. It's amazing. Like all these comments coming from Facebook, there's 18 of you guys. That's wow. But we've got hundreds and hundreds on X and Rumble, and yeah, I don't know why you guys aren't commenting and jumping in. I don't know. Whatever floats your boat. Sips. I'll see you tomorrow.